there are aspects of this author that is distinctive enough that they can't be counterfeited. I'll show you. I want to show you those. It's non-compromisable in its design. Now, how many have noticed there's 7s in the Bible? Anybody doesn't have his hand up hasn't ever read the Bible, right? Okay. They occur in over 600 passages. Some of them are very overt, 7 of this and 7 of that. Some of them are structural. You have to notice that in a covenant there's 7 provisions, but they don't leap out at you unless you're looking for them. But you always notice there's 7. And some are even hidden that you really have to know what you're looking for. And I'm going to suggest to you that these underlying heptadic signatures, heptadic is a fancy word for 7, 7-fold signatures. Now I want you to imagine that you have this assignment. You've got a scratch pad in front of you. You don't have to literally do this, but imagine I was going to give you this assignment. I want you to draft up a family tree. And you can do it from fiction for this exercise. A family tree. Father, son, so forth. Okay? But what I want you to do when you're through filling out this assignment and turning it in, when you turn it in, I want the number of words that you've used to be divisible by 7 exactly. In other words, the number of words you've got, if divided by 7, has no remainder. 7 exactly. You understand what I'm saying? That means, by the way, if you're just doing this randomly, you've got 6 chances of losing and 1 of winning. Because for every group of numbers, only one group in 7 will be even. You follow me? Okay. I want the number of letters you use. If I count them all up, divide by 7, it comes out even. How many feel you could do it so far? You're giving up already? How many could do it with if just the words were the criteria? With English it's easy. You can fudge a word and you count them up and I need an extra word, you can fudge it in, right? But now the letters, that's a little tricky, right? You still could do it probably, but it takes a little more effort. See, you're adding constraints. In a random sense, if I've got 2 7 constraints, 7 each, then I have only 1 chance in 49 of winning. You follow me? 7 squared. Okay. But I want the number of vowels and number of consonants also be divisible by 7. Getting a little pinched now, huh? A little tighter? Okay. I'm not through. I want the number of words that begin with a vowel divisible by 7. And then, of course, if everything else is met, then the consonants will follow. Okay. The number of words that occur more than once. Anybody still playing? Those that occur in more than one form divisible by 7. Only one form divisible by 7. The number of nouns shall be divisible by 7. Well, doesn't sound so hard. Only 7 words will not be nouns. Whoops. Starting to pinch a little bit. Number of names shall be divisible by 7, and only 7 other kinds of nouns be permitted. The number of male names shall be 7, the number of generations. Now, you probably guessed what I've done here. I want you to appreciate, though, how difficult it would be for you to do this by hand. Okay? This, of course, is the genealogy of Jesus Christ as found in the first 11 verses of Matthew. That's not all. These numbers happen to be taken from that group. And by the way, we're not talking about English, which is flexible. We're talking about Greek, where every verb has to meet 5 conditions. Not just past, present, future. That's just one of 5 different kinds of constraints on each verb in Greek. It's precise, which makes it very expressive, very, very scientific, but it also makes it very difficult to play games. It's in Greek. Now, it gets worse. Both Hebrew and Greek, they didn't have numbers. We're used to Arabic numbers in our culture. But both Greek and Hebrew used the letters for numbers. Each of the 22 letters in Hebrew and each of the 24 letters in Greek had a numerical value. This happens to be those. You don't have to memorize them. We're not going to have that kind of thing. But that means every word, if you take the letters, the value of those letters, each word has a value, a numerical value. Every sentence says, okay. The first 11 verses have a vocabulary of 72 words. The numerical value of those letters, when added up, is also a multiple of 7 exactly. It happens to add up to 42,364. But if you divide that by 7, it comes out even. That should make you uncomfortable. The likelihood of that happening is very small. If you take the groups of letters, each of those groups, as they're used in the vocabulary, also are exact multiple of 7. Think about the planning that had to go into that. So that the vocabulary using is also starting to be constrained. 7, each one 7, multiply by 7. Now, the remainder of chapter 1, now what I've told you so far, you may remember from learning the Bible in 24 hours, we use it several places just to get a warm-up and this sort of thing. But if you take the rest of chapter 1 in Matthew, there's 161 words left. They're also a multiple of 7. They have 105 different forms. That's a multiple of 7 exactly. The 77, the rest of the vocabulary is 77 words. That's also a multiple of 7, obviously. Within this chapter, the angel's going to speak. If you take the words of the angel, he has 28 words in his vocabulary. It's a multiple of 7 exactly. It has a geometrical value that's a multiple of 7 exactly. There are 35 different forms he uses, and that's also a multiple of 7 exactly. And the geometrical value of those words are also a multiple of 7. Okay? Always a multiple of 7. It's more complicated than this. I'm sparing you the fact that the angel speaks in rings, and there's encircling rings of 7 if you analyze the structure. But let's move on. In chapter 2, the childhood of Christ, the vocabulary is again 161 different words, multiple of 7. The number of letters in that chapter, this is all in the Greek, of course, multiple of 7 exactly, and there's the different forms are multiple of 7 exactly, and the values, again, geometrical values, are multiple of 7. That astounds me. It's one thing to play around with the number of words, even the letters, but to get the values to add up. It's analogous to my adding up the ages of everybody in this audience and summing it and coming out to a multiple of 7 exactly. How do you engineer that? The likelihood is obviously, rare. So, and by the way, if you take the 4 different divisions of this chapter, and there's 3 different speakers between angel, Joseph, and so forth, they all have similar package structures, always a multiple of 7. If you have 2 constraints, it's 1 chance in 49 of winning, 48 losing, right? If you have 3 constraints simultaneously operating, it's 7 cubed. 4, you have 1 chance in 2,407 of getting it correct just by accident, by randomness. If you have 9 rules, and that's what I gave you in the first little bit, that's 1 chance in 40 million of it coming out by chance. Okay? Would you like to try doing that? If you played my little game, well, you've got, if you work 8 hours a day, 40 hours a week, 50 weeks a year, that seems reasonable. 8 hours a day, 40 hours a week, that is. Give you weekends off, 50 weeks a year. That means there's 2,000 man hours person hours, girls, sorry, per year. or 120,000 minutes per year. To get 7 to 9 chances, your chance of getting any specific sequence in that would be one chance in more than 40 million. So if it takes you 10 minutes per draft, you do one of these and try it and turn it in. If you can do one every 10 minutes, you can knock this off in about 3,362 years. Which is a crude way of pointing out that it's not likely to happen except by design. You follow me? Okay. It gets worse, gang. There are examples that we're going to talk about where we're not talking about 9 rules. We're going to talk about 34 rules. When you get to, especially in the Gospel of Mark, there's a lot of debate about the last 12 verses of Mark. And one of the astonishing discoveries is that it has heptadic structures that comply to over 70 constraints. We're just taking half of those here. They turn out to be a very big number. For 34 constraints, you're talking about 5 times 10 to the 28th tries. There are about 3 times 10 to the 7th seconds per year. Let's assume you could try 400 million per second by using a supercomputer. You program a computer to generate these drafts. If you got 4 times 10 to the 8th tries per second, it would still take over 4 million computer years. So if you had a million supercomputers, you would take about another 4 million years using them. I want you to get used to recognize that's what we call design, in contrast to randomness. Someone designed this, did it deliberately. And we're obviously studying the discoveries of Dr. Ivan Panin. His books are well distributed. You can get your hands on them if you're interested. He was born in Russia in 1855, got exiled at an early age, got involved with a plot against the Tsar. So he emigrated to Germany and then to the United States. He graduated from Harvard in 1882 and discovered Jesus Christ. Now, every one of us in this room that has discovered Christ is a result of a miracle. But if you got a PhD in mathematics from Harvard, that's even a bigger miracle. Okay? But he discovered, after he became a Christian, he discovered what's now known as the heptadic structures that underlie the biblical text. He discovered that in 1890. He committed the next 50 years of his life generating over 43,000 pages of discoveries. Very tedious reading. This stuff is tough to go through because it's tedious, tough work. He didn't have a computer to help him either. He's doing this manually. But his discoveries are astonishing. That's obviously what we're sharing here, and you can check them out. And they do check out, by the way. And he went to the Lord in 1942. And I do suspect that the Lord said, "Well done, good and faithful servant." Now, the comprehensive, I want to carry this just a step further. The New Testament consists of 27 books. So there's a word that opens the book, and there's a word that closes the book. Right? So if you got 27 books with a front and end, you have 54 words, right? If you take the total New Testament, the vocabulary of all the first and last words put together, there are 28 different words. It's a multiple of 7 exactly. Oh. The ones in the Gospels, it's also 7 different words, open and close the Gospels. Again, a multiple of 7 exactly. If you take the geometrical value of that, it also is a multiple of 7 exactly. The shortest word is a single letter. It happens to have a value of 70. That's multiple of 7, obviously. The value of the longest word has a value of 1,512, which happens to be 7 times 6 times 6 times 6. The word is apocalypsis. I think that's kind of interesting. Now, this is the one of all of these that blows me away. But you got to think it through. The vocabulary of Matthew, as evidenced by his gospel, if you take all the words there and make a list of the different words, you'll discover that the vocabulary that is unique to Matthew, these are words that you'll only find in Matthew. You don't find anywhere else in the New Testament. The vocabulary that's unique to Matthew occurs 42 times. That's a multiple of 7 exactly. And there are 126 letters represented by this vocabulary that's unique to him. It's a multiple of 7. Now let's stop and think for a second. The only thing that this vocabulary I'm talking about has that's distinctive is that none of the other writers, there's 7 other writers, there's 8 altogether, 7 other writers, don't use those words. If you want to assume this happened accidentally, that's mathematically disputable. If you say, well, no, somebody has just been very, very clever here. Great, no problem. How did he do this? There's only 2 ways. He had to get the other 7 guys, all 8 guys sat down, and they agreed not to use those 42 words, the other 7. How many think that happened? I don't think so. Or you can use this feature as an argument that Matthew had to have written his last. How else could he organize this? The only way he could make this happen, if it's deliberate on his part, is to have all the other writings in front of him. How many think that happened? Well, the Gospel of Matthew has this characteristic, so does the Gospel of Mark. If you take the vocabulary that Mark, or Peter if you will, have for Mark's Gospel, it's a number of words, number of letters that are a multiple of 7 exactly. So that proves that Mark must have written last. Except the same thing's true of Luke. The vocabulary in the Gospel of Luke and Acts put together, so is John. Each one of these was written last. Whoops. So is Peter, James, Jude, and Paul. Each one must have been written last. Because each one has a vocabulary that's distinctive to it, that's a multiple of 7 exactly. And when you start to think about this, you begin to realize there's no way that this could have been cleverly engineered. Because these guys are writing at different times, under different circumstances. You follow me? Doesn't compute. Some of these clusters of 7 bridge the Old New Testament. The term hallelujah occurs 24 times in the Old Testament, 4 times in the book of Revelation, or the New Testament. 24 plus 4 is 28, a multiple of 7 exactly. Hosanna, shepherd. There's a whole list of these. I just put some of them on here. That Jehovah Sabaoth is 285 times in the Old Testament, twice in the New Testament. But whatever the numbers are, it's always a multiple of 7. If you take the Old and the New Testament, it's one book. One book. Wow is right. When you begin to embrace this, when you begin to understand what this is really saying, it gives you an awe and a respect for the Bible that is shared by no other book on the planet Earth. It is supernatural in its origin. Always multiples of 7.